So how does restaurant business differ between the London zones? How you run a restaurant, for example, somewhere in zone 6 like Cockfosters versus how you run a restaurant in central London is very different. It comes to two things. Number one is table intensity and number two is the type of cuisine. So as you know, the commonsensical for the first one is very high-end fine dining does not work in deprived areas or areas which are too far removed from the centre of London. You don't get any corporate footfall, unless it's, for example, the very rich area like Oxshott in Surrey. Fine dining doesn't tend to work, for example, in a small town on the outskirts of London. But of course, fine dining and table spends where you have £500 bills, that always happens to be the case in central London, because also those people who live in Oxshott, who live in the outskirts, for a special occasion, they travel into central London. That's number one of restaurant economics, which is if you want a high-end, fine dining, great margin restaurant concept, often it has to be launched in the centre of a city. But the second one, for example, with restaurants like Paro, where the spend you can get as low as £15 per person, how does that work? And that's to do with table intensity. Because regardless of whether I open a fine dining restaurant in central London or something that's more competitively priced, like a Paro, like a Disham, like a Masala Zone, what happens there is table intensity, which is essentially on this table, how many people dine in the restaurant over a given day. In zone 6 or in zone 5 or in zone 4 in London, for example, even if someone sits on that table once, that is enough for the restaurant to make its money and continue operating. But in central London, where the rents are so high, the rates are so high, the wages are so much more extortionate and competitive, that table needs to be used at least 3-4 times a day for the restaurant to keep breaking over. That's where intensity comes into play. And that's why you see so many restaurants where they're very competitive priced. For example, like Fat Pundit, they often have time limits. Or with restaurants that have queues, for example, Entrecote or Disham, table intensity. You'll often see queues because that table needs to be used 4 or 5 times in a restaurant. Of course, you may argue, how do you get a customer to sit here 4 or 5 times over the course of, for example, 3 to 9 o'clock? The truth is, in London, when everyone comes for the day out, they have so many things to do, whether it's see the theatre, see a show, go to a football game. So they have their own plans anyway. So often they have things they need to be, they have places they need to be.